going to cover Hatch, which is a wonderful, wonderful tool that we can use in AutoCAD. And I know you don't recognize this drawing, so what I'd like for you to do is maybe just open up a new drawing and go to the home tab, maybe make a couple rectangles. I'm going to make one that's exactly 3 feet by 6'8" to kind of represent a door that I'm going to use later. But then you can also just create some more rectangles that you can play with, or you could go to Polyline and just create some different kind of shape. Maybe you could actually create a shape that doesn't quite connect at the end, because we're going to use that as well within our hatch. But before I get into this, I want to remind you that active learning, as opposed to passive learning, is the best way to learn something. So instead of taking a passive role and just trying to have somebody feed you a bunch of information, taking an active role, which a lot of you are doing, so that is awesome, is an active role is to actually dig in. Don't forget about your book. Your book is awesome. It covers 99% of what we are covering in this class. There's other options within the book that send you to other sources to get even more information. Don't forget to watch lectures, maybe even more than once, so that if something doesn't sink in the first time, it can the second time. I am here for you guys, but I just want to make sure that you really take a kind of digging in deep and research approach to this, because that's when it sticks. That's when it really sinks in the best, and you really, really learn it instead of just kind of, I'm going to learn this for the class and be done. I want to make sure that when you go out to the workforce, you not only are good at your job, but you are like the best in the business, okay? So I want to make sure this really sinks in for you. Okay, so jumping into Hatch. Hatch is creating a graphic pattern within a space. So let me show you what I mean by a graphic pattern. This right here is graphic patterns. Over here, for this back patio, they have like a cobblestone, kind of a pebble type of pattern. And yes, it's repetitive, but if you look closely, look how long it would take you to create all of those lines and to repeat them and to create more. That would take a long time, right? If I click this, it is one single object. Let's move this out of the way. If it'll let me. Wow, it won't let me today. So it's one single object. It's not just a bunch of circles. They see it as one. Another example is if I go to the front. This is a very elaborate brick pattern. And you can see it's called kind of the herringbone pattern. It's one you're going to use on your assignment, so don't forget that. So it's called the ARH bone pattern. But notice how detailed this one is. You could create this with an array. It would be a very elaborate array, and sometimes that does work for other cases. But this is just one object right now. And if I zoom in here, this is what is called a concrete pattern. So it's the ARCONC for concrete, and it is what is used in architectural and interior design drawings to represent concrete, triangles and dots, okay? But it looks very random. This is also a hatch, and yes, it could be created by just, copying lines over or doing an array, but it's a lot easier with hatch. So we are going to learn hatch. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually create a floor pattern in the kitchen. This is a kitchen, and yes, the sink is not put in and the stove is not put in. That's okay. It's still the kitchen and the dining room area, okay? This is the kitchen island. It's also got 2 skylights. So the way hatch works is it detects a boundary. So there has to be a closed boundary. Like if I put a hatch here, this right here, this rectangle is a closed boundary. It can see it, it can find it, and it will put the hatch within it. Same with this patio. It found this boundary of a curved line plus all of these lines around the edge to be able to detect the boundary to put the hatch in, going around this little fire pit, okay? So what I want to first do is look at my drawing and say, okay, where's going to be the boundary of my hatch? I don't want it to actually go into these rooms, and technically it would go into this room and hit the door, and it would see that as a boundary. That wouldn't be very good because I want it to actually stop at maybe a door, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is freeze some layers. So I'm going to go up to the, kind of like the quick freeze on our layer portion of our home tab. I'm going to click that and say I want to freeze the door layer. I also want to freeze the above layer. That's what these are on for the skylights, because obviously the floor would be on the floor and not within the skylights. Okay, but even freezing those, I still have to kind of make some lines here. I don't want this pattern to go into this living room over here. I want one floor pattern to be here, and I want another to be in the living room. That happens a lot in our buildings, right? So I'm going to go to the correct layer. This is another thing that also has to be set up. Under my layer properties, I already have 3 for my hatch, but this is where if you're following along and doing a drawing yourself, you can create a layer called hatch, or you can call one called wall hatch and another called floor hatch. For mine, this is a system of layers that is used a lot in offices or companies. They will create what they have a dash, and they have a system of calling their layers. You may run into this in your layer standards within a company. So all these a dash are layers within the A or the architectural drawings, whereas the L dash is for the landscape. So I have an L walk to designate the outline of a walk area, but I also have an L walk pat for L walk pattern. So that would be what this pebble for the patio is on, and also the front drive and the wood. It's all on that layer. If I want to create a floor, I have my A floor pat for my flooring pattern or my hatch that I'm going to put in. So I'm going to make that current. You can create one similar to this in your drawing. You can call it just floor pattern, like I said, or something that'll help you to remember it. Sometimes I just call it hatch, just straight and easy. I will go later and use the A wall pat for the wall pattern, and we're going to also fill in our walls. So I've got that set current, and now I need to draw the boundary of where this pattern is going to be compared to where it's not going to go into. So I'm going to draw a line, kind of like a break line of where, like a wood floor would change into a carpet. So I'm going to draw a straight line. I'm not going to go to the midpoint because that actually won't be straight. I'm going to let it go to perpendicular so it hits that wall. So now it won't go into the living room. This happens to be the mudroom. This happens to be the bathroom. So in this case, they want the pattern to go into the bathroom, but not into the mudroom. So I'm going to create a line right here at the door opening. So it won't go in to this room, but it will go into this room because hatch will detect that boundary. Okay. And then I'm going to make sure my boundary actually shows on my screen. Sometimes AutoCAD will give you an error if it doesn't. Now, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it works perfectly. It's just a, just in case kind of thing. Okay, so I've got my boundary set. I've got my layer set. I'm on the correct layer. And now I'm ready to start the command. The command happens to be right here on the Home tab with the draw commands, and it's this one in this corner. So if I hover on it, it does show that it's hatch, and it kind of explains what it's going to do. It's going to find the boundary and create a pattern within it. So once I click that, my ribbon will change. These are all of the different things we're going to go over for hatch. This is the default pattern for hatch. and it happens to be ANSI 31. It's just diagonal lines, but it'll create diagonal lines all throughout the boundary. Okay, you can kind of skip this point, this piece right here, because it's on the default of pick points. That is the standard. Okay, you can select your own boundary by going in and clicking all the different edges of it, but the pick points means you just pick within the boundary and it finds it. So cool that way. So I'm going to set it, I'm just going to keep it on the default, and I'm going to click. And notice I haven't even clicked yet. I've just kind of hovered in that space. It's already detected the boundary. It's already shown me where it's going to hatch. Okay, and it doesn't look like a diagonal line pattern, does it? That's another thing with hatch, is the scale. Right now it says 1 inch. And notice once I got out of that, it kind of, took it away. But it's saying that it's 1 inch right now. I am on architectural scale or units. But as soon as I change this to 8 and hit enter, and then come back over here, notice it's a little bit closer together. Okay, now every hatch pattern has its own scale. That can kind of drive you crazy. I do know for this one that the space between the lines is exactly 1 inch. And I'll show you how I know that. I'm going to hit enter. Oh, it didn't like that because I zoomed out. Let's try that again, and I will hit enter while it's still out. So I just clicked within it. Okay, I'm going to zoom in, and I know that these are 1 inch apart. I can actually go to my home tab, and I can go to distance. Okay, and I can kind of do my own little measuring. If I click there and move my cursor to the other side, I can see that it's 1 inch. It won't give you something weird like 5/16 of an inch or something strange. It'll actually give you like a real unit. So each line is 1 inch apart. So if I wanted them 8 inches apart, well, this hatch has already been created. So let me actually delete that. But going back to hatch, I have for 8 is where they're 1 inch apart, which technically means that each line is 1/8 of an inch apart. How's that for being kind of small? And I will tell you that the way that it works, hatch normally, is they will work in units of either 8 or 10 or sometimes 12. So that's kind of a little trick with hatch. But I'm going to click here, and if I want those lines to be 8 inches apart, I'm going to do the math. 8 times 8, 64, and hit enter. Those lines are now 8 inches apart. Okay? Now, if I wanted them 6, obviously I would do the math and go 6 times 8, and that would be 48. Okay, so they got a little bit closer together. So that's something that you might just have to play with for your own hatch patterns. But now I've got the scale. That's one thing I can cover. The angle. This hatch pattern is already at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so if you want it at a 45-degree angle, it's already set to go. But say I wanted it to go up and down. Angle works based on the angle it's already at. So this one is already set at 45 degrees, so I don't have to change that to be 45 degrees, right? But if I changed it by clicking right here and putting 45, it will actually add that degree to what is already present, which means 45 plus 45 would be 90. Okay, so now it's at a 90-degree angle. Sweet. But something that also is kind of important, I'm going to skip over this transparency. We're going to go over that when I do the wall hatch. But this one right here, set origin, unfortunately this one looks pretty good in the way it's sitting within the space. Notice it's starting at this edge and it's going across. Okay, so the actual spacing of this is pretty good. But what if I change this to be a different pattern, like one that I use a lot? I'm going down over here through my different patterns. By the way, this is where you find all your patterns, is to go through this little arrow, okay, here. You also can hit this one and it'll show you kind of a more, you know, a window of all of them. And I do have more than what's in AutoCAD. I've created my own. I've got some online. But I'm going to go down to what they call net. And it is just what it says. It's a net pattern of going crisscross. Okay? So I'm going to select that one. And because I'm at the 45-degree angle, it's at a 45. Because normally, if I change this back to 0, it is literally at a very straightforward pattern. And unfortunately, it didn't mess up over here where I wanted it to. So let's kind of get rid of this and see if I can have it not work the way I wanted it to, and it's still showing it differently. Well, let's say, because it's lined up exactly at that corner, let's say that my client wanted the pattern to actually be even with the corner of this counter. This is where you can go set origin, and when you do a set origin, it kind of resets where it's going to start from. So if I select that corner, it will start from that corner and create the pattern coming out from that corner. So usually when I do this one, it's not set evenly with this edge, and you've got a little bit of tile showing and then a big piece of tile, but that would be how you would reset where it starts, where it starts showing the display. Now if you can see right here, it's not starting exactly there, so you have a half a piece of tile, if this was tile, but it's lined up here. So if you did want it to start at this exact corner, I could go to set origin again, and I could reset it to start there. And yes, sometimes it is actually at a line, and sometimes it's in the middle of space. So it's something that I personally have to play with a little bit to make sure I have it at the right origin I want. But that's one of the options that I can do for Hatch. Another thing is, let's say that they don't want a tile pattern like this. They actually want wood. Okay, I could go in and create that wood pattern, right? But look, I already have it up here, right? So I could actually go to this like cheating tab and say match properties. And notice if I hit down here at this part of that command part, it will say use current origin. So that would actually be the current origin of the one I'm going to select. Or it could say source origin, which means it's going to be in the top left corner. So if I say current origin and then select this hatch pattern that's already there, it will actually change it to be just like that one. It will take the layer with it. So if it's on the wrong layer, you may want to have to change that layer later, but you could actually check it here. So the way to do that would to actually bring up what I call the old Hatch block that used to come up. This is the way Hatch used to be run before they had this wonderful ribbon. It shows everything that would be on the ribbon, plus a little bit extra, but in a different way. So the type is here, the pattern is here, the angle is here, the scale is here. They're all here. The hatch origin, like the set origin, that's down here at this point. The boundaries, remember I said we do the pick points, that's also here. But they have another thing right here for layer. So this one is actually on my landscape walk pattern layer. So I can change that to say use current, because I did set it for the floor, or I could force it to say, you know what, I want it to be on the A floor pattern, which is down here. They're not even in alphabetical order. And I could force it to select the pattern that I want if I'm not sure if I'm on the current layer. Okay, I'm going to go back, I'm going to go through the rest of these in a little bit. So I'm going to hit OK. So now I know it's on the right layer. I've got the pattern I want, I've matched it, I've even set the origin. So I'm going to hit enter. But I want to tell you, if you hit escape instead of enter, and it'll still put it there. So funny about some of these commands. So whether you hit escape or enter, it will put the pattern there 99% of the time. So if you don't want it, you would literally have to click it and get rid of it. But notice when I click it, two things happen. One, it's all one pattern within this space, so I could hit delete and get rid of it. I'm going to undo that. But notice what else I can do. When I click this, it actually will allow me to change certain things that maybe I missed the first time. Maybe I didn't have associative on, which I'm going to show you in a little bit because that's quite important. That associative means that it will update if you change your boundary. Okay, so I'm going to show you that with the wall. So I can edit with that, but it also shows me the quick properties I could change over here. It shows that it's all one pattern. So that's one way you can edit a hatch. So let's look at some other things. Let's say that I want to color in these walls. Okay, that's a lot of walls, right? I mean, I would have to go through this entire project, but I need them all colored in. And the way Hatch works is it will detect this boundary and stop at the window and go back and stop at this window. So it'll fill in this piece. So let's go up here, change my layer to be a wall pattern. Okay, I'm going to go to my hatch command. Okay, and I'm going to click here. Notice what happens as soon as I click or even hover. It's going to bring up the last pattern that I used. It's on the correct layer. Okay, so that's cool. It did update the layer, but it's not the right pattern. So what I've been showing you so long for all this time so far is patterns. But if I go up here and kind of click within this pattern, I have two other options. One is solid and one is gradient. I'll show you gradient when I'm done with the rest of the things, but solid means it basically colors it in, kind of like you're coloring in your coloring book, okay? Which probably is how Hatch started. But it will color in this space. Now this is where Hatch transparency works really well. So if I change that number to a 50, notice how light it got. So it fades out your hatch. Now I wouldn't want that for one of my patterns, but for coloring in a wall, it actually is kind of nice because it won't make it solid, dark, right? It'll kind of just fade it off. 50 may be too much, but notice you can do a slider with this, okay? So you can make it really faded out, which, what would be the point, right? Or halfway, or maybe I could set this more to like 30. So you can either change the number or you can just move it like a slider, okay? So that's the hatch transparency for this. Another thing is I could go and I could click here. And look what happened. It actually colored in the whole thing. Sometimes that will happen with AutoCAD. I don't want it to hatch within those windows, so I'm going to hit escape and actually undo what I just did. I was trying to show you something else, so let me see if I can replicate what I was doing. I'm going to go to solid. I'm going to set it before I even get to it. I'm going to go to about 30, 35, whatever. I'm going to click here, but I'm also going to click here and here, and I'm going to hit enter. Once I do that, it sees all of these, and I know it's hard to tell by just having this block here, but all of these as the hatch. So if I wanted to, let's say the client wanted to stretch this piece right here, that would be kind of difficult, but we're going to try it. We're going to try to just get this corner. They want to stretch this wall out a little bit. It's grabbing this floor, it's grabbing the walls, okay? But when I pull it out, look at that. It's pulling it without the hatch, okay? Ooh, I said that and look what happened. It didn't pull this one, but it did pull this one. Okay, so that's obviously a problem. Let's undo that. What I was trying to show you is you can actually create separate hatches. Right now, it's seeing that as a full hatch here, here, and here. Ooh, another way to show that. If I wanted to erase just these ends right here, and I went to erase, it's going to erase the whole thing. So if you went through your entire project and hatched all the walls and just needed to erase a certain portion, you'd have to start over with your hatch. Okay, that's not always fun. So I'm going to refill this, but I'm going to go and show you an option you can select. Over here on the options, if I select that, I have several things down here. One is the gap tolerance. Let me warn you, never, ever, 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 okay, 99% of the time, don't change that. Because what it does is it changes the gaps in your boundary from 0 to some other number that you can set for. But right underneath that, go back to that again, is create separate hatches. Usually I have this on all the time because I want to select a number of walls and then keep going. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to go back in and hatch these two pieces and hit enter. And notice now I could just select that one and hit delete. So it didn't delete all of my hatch. It only deleted that one. Let me put that one back. Let me show you something else that could happen. It happens quite a bit, so I'm forcing it to do it. But if I select this piece right here, notice this error that comes up. This may come up a lot. It'll come up if it can't find the boundary because it's not shown on your screen, the entire thing. It also will show if you don't have a closed boundary. And this is where you can see how precise you were with your drawings, okay? It's kind of a nice little check. It will actually show with a red circle where a closed boundary is not, okay? So I'm going to close this. It explains it right here, but I'm going to close that. If I zoom in here, it is having little circles right here. The boundary was not closed right here. In other words, my wall did not meet those two lines at an intersection. So I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to fix it like I should, right? I'm going to go to fillet and fillet those two lines. As soon as you fix it, the actual red circles go away. So I can go back to hatch. I can click, and it found the boundary. There is no error. So I can continue and go click and click and click, and I can continue to click as many walls as I want and hit enter. Now each of these are separate pieces. See, I could delete that one if I wanted to, and it's a lot faster than going in and doing it separately each command, right? Another thing I want to show you is, and I can do this with the edit as well. So I could do this when I'm creating it, or I can show you through the edit piece of this. But notice how it went around the island. That is because it's on the normal boundary. So if I go under options, well, actually it isn't. It's on the outer island. I guess that's become the new default for AutoCAD. Normal is if I had an island within an island. Like if I had something within here, it would actually hatch what's in here, what's in the middle of this island, and then hatch on the outer. You can kind of see a representation of that. Outer means it'll only go to the outer part, but if I say ignore, it'll ignore any island I have in my drawing and hatch right over it, and just keep going to the boundary that it can find. Obviously, I wouldn't want that in this case, but it is an option if you don't want it to see an island and you want it to hatch over it. Okay. Oops, I was trying to change it back and I hit the wrong one. So let me go in and hit outer again to fix it. Okay. I'm going to hit escape. Let me show you another way that's really cool to use that. Let's say that I want to hatch this bedroom, but I also want to label each and every one of these rooms. This is where I am reviewing your annotative text and dimensioning, because you will be using both of those for your assignments coming up. Okay, so I'm going to actually go to my layer called Notes. Okay, and I want to put some annotative text in these rooms. Okay, as a reminder, when you're doing annotative text, you have to make sure that your text is annotative. So if I go to annotative, I call it Anno Arc so that I remember it's annotative. But notice it has the little icon that it's annotative. The check is here. I don't have any text height, so I can make it any height I want. Okay, that is the text I'm going to be using. But the first thing I need to do after I've set my style is go down here to the bottom on your little quick status bar and click that you want to set it to the scale you want this drawing to be displayed at. Okay, so just thinking ahead. Okay, in paper space, I want to be able to print it so it prints at 1/4 inch equals a foot, because it can't be 1:1. Now think in your head, why can it not be 1:1? Did you say it's because this is too big? Yeah, that would be why. This is a huge house. If you wanted to print it 1:1, it would be the size of the house. I don't think they make paper that big, and it would be kind of hard to travel with and such. So that's why we create scales, right? Okay, so I'm going to print this at 1/4 inch equals a foot on my paper. Now notice I don't have to go to my paper. I don't have to go to a layout. I haven't even created one yet. Notice they're blank, but I need to set the scale. So I'm going to go down here to annotative scale, and I'm going to say I want this to be 1/4 inch equals a foot. So now it's set and ready for my text, annotative text, to be 1/4 inch equals a foot. So I go to multi-line text, I go to multi-line, I'm going to set my first corner. This is where I need to set the height. So I'm going to hit H and enter. And yes, that is normally the height that I would put it, but I think for yours or most of yours, it's 1/8 of an inch. So let's just do that, just for fun. I'm going to select the other corner. Oops, keep in mind, if I needed to justify, then I would have to do that here and not, well, you could do it after the fact. But just don't forget about the justification. Don't want you to miss some of the sweet little standards that we need to set. Let's say I wanted to actually justify it to be in the middle of the room. So I'm going to say middle center. Okay, it's not in the middle of the room, but let's just make a box to create the text. So I'm going to say that this is actually a bedroom. Oh, maybe it will be close to the middle. Bedroom. And I'm going to click out of text. Now I could actually have this underlined by just double clicking and then highlighting it and going to underline. I also could, change some of the other features like bold or italics or whatever. Just keep in mind, I could also check the justification, make sure it's middle center, which it was, but so I'm going to hit, whoops, yes, I do want to save. You can't hit escape sometimes. So now I have a label for this room. I could be more precise, or what I tell my husband, I'm more monkish, if you ever watch that show, Monk. Okay, but it's in the center. I need to establish my boundaries, so I'm going to go up to the floor, the floor pattern, which is right here, and I'm going to set some boundaries. I don't want it to go into the bath, okay, so I'm going to make a line where the door is and not let it go into the bath. I want it to go in the closet, but I don't want it to go into the hall, okay? So depending on where in your drawings you make that line is where you actually make it. So if it's on the outside or the inside, check your drawings, because that's going to be precise when you do your hatch. But look what else will happen. When I go to hatch and I click, and yes, it's on solid, so I wouldn't want it to be on solid. So I'm going to go to match properties and have it match, what if I wanted a herringbone in there? So I'm going to have it match that pattern, but look what it did. It went around the text. It sees this as an island now. So if I didn't have that checked, it would actually go right over it. Let's see if I go to this and say ignore. I said that and now it's still getting it. It sees text as kind of something special, which is kind of cool. It tried to fill it in there, but text is kind of special. So it will go around your text. So don't forget that when you're creating your hatch, that to make sure and go around that. Couple more things I want to show you. One is to actually keep the boundary. What do I mean by that? So if I go under this little arrow for my options and bring up all my options, here's that island detection. It's kind of easier to see here rather than in that little piece. This down here, inherit properties, is just like match properties on your ribbon. So they act exactly the same way. You can click this and have it match another hatch pattern that you already have. Okay? But this is one that I wanted to show you right here. Right now, it's not retaining the boundaries, which it means it's not creating an actual boundary with a line around here. But if I click that, I have the option of keeping it as a polyline or a region. Now, a lot of people say, well, there's absolutely no difference. Technically, there is. A polyline will just create a line that's all connected that shows the boundary, which is cool. It's a group of lines acting as one. But a region is technically a little bit better, a little bit more sophisticated. There's pros and cons. A region is a fixed boundary, but it's not just a boundary, it's actually a fixed area. So it's a closed boundary that when you get into 3D, you can quickly change to a 3D object, which means I could have this entire floor have a thickness, maybe even come into the space. It can be turned into a 3D object. But another good thing about a region is it'll tell you the area. So I'm going to let it do an actual region to show you an example of that. And I've already selected this internal point, so I'm going to hit enter. But now you can actually see the boundary. See that red line? It is on, if I select this, it is on the layer A floor pattern. So in some cases, if I don't want that extra line to show, I may put it on a separate layer. I may actually go to layer properties, create a brand new layer, and call it A-floor. Ooh, I had it in all caps. Let's try that again. A-floor-pat-region. Let's capitalize that so that I know that's the boundary, the region line that I want. Or you could call it boundary, okay? I could give it even a different color if I wanted to see it even more clearly. Sometimes it doesn't show more clearly anyway, but I just created that layer and I can click this and say, you know what, I don't want it to be on that layer. I want it to be on this new layer. And notice what I mean about not showing. It's kind of hard to show because it's already got a boundary there. But if I click this region, ooh, another thing I forgot to tell you before I go into that is under the layer properties, I could actually say for this to be no plot to make sure that that won't show up when I plot this drawing. But also what I wanted to show you is when I click this and then go up to properties, remember your properties for all the properties of this is this down arrow right here. And let's get this out of the way. It will tell me the area. So yes, it'll show it in inches, but in feet, it's 172 square feet. A wonderful way to check, like, hint, hint, your table that you're going to be creating for an assignment to see if you have the right square footage showing, because it will tell you the square footage of that space. Okay, wonderful thing about region. So there you've got your region, you've got your hatch, it goes around your text. You're in pretty good shape, right? Another one I wanted to show you, I'm going to go back over here to these little boxes I've got going on here. So if I go to hatch, I've shown you some patterns. By the way, don't forget to look through here. This A parquet, you're going to be using for one of your assignments. The herringbone, the AR, where is that? Herringbone. Oh, I was right on it. Right there. There's the concrete. They are technically in alphabetical order, so you can't just go to parquet. It's called AR parquet. But just don't forget that you can look through all of your different hatches through there and find the one that you need. But the one thing I wanted to show you now is, instead of pattern or solid, is a gradient. Gradient, I have to admit, I don't use very often. But you can create a gradient of going from one color to another color. Right now it's set on blue and yellow, okay? I could change the yellow to be orange if I was super into Broncos or something. It will gradiate or change from blue to orange gradually. But notice the different ways you can show it. You can show it, I have to actually click here. You can show it with a circle radiating from the center. Notice it's on centered right here. So if I uncheck that, it will go to the origin and then radiate from there. So it depends on how you want it to show. But you have the different ways of showing the gradient. Also, if you just click this off, it will only go from your color to black or to white, showing up on your layout. So gradient is also another wonderful thing, and you could actually change the tinting of that. It doesn't work real well with just one color, so you kind of have to put your color back and then put in your tint that you would want for that. It still doesn't like it right now. It's rebelling, but that's another option, is the gradient. Okay, I just hit escape. It still shows it. I do actually want to get rid of this so that I can show you something else. And I need to actually change now my feature, one of my options, back. Whoops, not those options. I need it to actually change back to a polyline, because what I'm going to show you next, it won't work with region. It will only work with polyline. So that has to actually be rechecked if you're going to do what I'm going to show you next. And sometimes this has to be turned off. Let's see if it's going to work with that turned on. But I'm going to hit OK. I'm just kind of going to do an actual hatch and hit escape. Just to kind of have it set, so I don't want it to change back to that. Before I show you super hatch, which is new, let me show you what happens by making sure this is associative. I can stretch. The client now said that this is going to be 2 feet bigger. Okay, so I'm going to set my ortho on. I'm going to set for 2 feet, and notice what happened. Because it's associative, both the wall and the floor stretched with it. So it retained its boundary and just continued on with that pattern. Super cool. If you don't have associative turned on for your hatch, it won't work. And don't forget where that is, by the way, right here. So it does need to be associative. Annotative won't work for here because I'm not going to use text for my pattern. So that's not necessary. If I was, that'd be cool. Okay, so I'm going to escape from here, and I'm going to show you, oops, one more thing before I show you super hatch. I know I keep teasing about super hatch, right? Another modification is, let's say the client does now not want this hatch pattern to go in here, okay? It's all one hatch, which is a bummer because I can't separate these two, right? I can't like change this one and keep this one the same unless I use the wonderful trim command. So it will help you with that. So I'm going to create a line from here to here. This is where I need the break to be between the hatch. And I'm going to go to trim, and I'm going to say I want to trim from this line, and then I'm going to select this. And isn't that cool? Now I can set another hatch pattern here, maybe a tile, different than this hatch pattern here. So it will trim. It also helps if, remember how it went through the windows? You can also trim if it accidentally goes through a window. You can trim it in the window. Sometimes. I will warn you, it doesn't always work. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show, Super Hatch. This is fairly new. It's under the Express Tools tab. Is right here. Okay, it is different than regular Hatch. Super Hatch is where you can take an image, a block, an XREF, which we haven't gone into yet, and actually turn it into a pattern. Let me show you what I mean. Hopefully it'll work. Sometimes it doesn't. ACC logo in our title block. I'm going to select that as the image that I want to repeat. I'm going to say open. I'm going to make sure it's on a no path so it will still find it. That's a bummer when it doesn't. I'm going to hit OK. It wants to know where I want to, make sure this all shows, where I want it to start. So I want it to start at this corner. I'm going to pull it out just by pulling on my cursor so that it'll go about halfway through that door space, and I'm going to click. Okay, it puts it in there, but it's still asking me questions, and this is where sometimes it doesn't work. But it's asking me, is the placement acceptable? Acceptable. It's a hard word for me. Yes, it is. It's acceptable. Okay. Then it's going to ask for some options. For some reason, even though it's waiting for me to click a point, it sometimes wants me to actually hit I for internal point and enter. And it'll give me this little error like, wait, I wanted a point. Just believe me, if I sometimes just hit the point, it won't always work. But let's see if it'll work if I just click now. Okay, good. It selected the boundary. It sees the boundary. So I'm going to hit enter, and it will actually recreate ACC logo in a pattern throughout the door. So if you had a cool image you wanted as a pattern, that might be a way you could do that, is with Super Hatch. It does have its little quirks, but most of the time it will work. And don't forget, it has to be set on that boundary of polyline rather than region. But let's try it with a block. So remember the block we created last week, Thursday, was a mask face. Now, it already found it, okay? So, that's interesting. Most of the time I have to go to File and look for it. But maybe I have it in this drawing and forgot. But I can have a block, and I'm going to set the parameters on the screen. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to ask, where do I want that to be placed? Well, let's say at the midpoint of basically the door. Okay, so I'm going to have it start in the middle. So I'm going to click with my left mouse right there. But I want it to only be, let's say 0.75 of the scale. So 3/4 the scale of what it is. Okay, I don't want it to rotate, so I'm going to hit enter for 0. Is this placement acceptable? Yes, I want it right there. Okay, the next thing that it's asking is for, which I didn't get it for the image, is the extents of the image. Is this the extents of the image that I want to be shown? And it's showing it to go kind of as a box around the circle. That works for me. So I'm going to hit enter. Now it's asking for that wonderful thing where it's actually wanting a point, but I have to hit I and enter to let me give it a point. So I did that. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click enter. And now it makes a smiley face pattern all over my door. I have to admit, I don't use Super Hatch a lot, but it is an option that you can use. So that covers basically all that I wanted to cover for the Hatch. Oh, have fun with Hatch. I think it's actually makes things a lot easier